These tales of buildings have never been told. Their secrets lying dormant, hovering below. Various structures once graced these streets. Now, remnants of their existence are found only in memory.
If historians scour enough places, they may reveal relics.
Souvenirs to uncover secrets of the buildings that once stood. We need to preserve and protect our past.
Remembering what made this town, sitting in piles of brick buried in the ground.
Once tall and mighty, now crumbled into dust.
Smothered in ashes and wrought with rust.
The great past has weakened them to the point of tragedy.
But even rubble can tell a story.
Time flows and the memories wash away with it. Not all stories pass through generations.
But if we work together, we can save them before history dies. Bring the buildings back to life.
In 1894, the jail was built on Jefferson Street in the middle of the block in Montpelier, Indiana. It was a small brick building with police and mayor's office painted on the front bricks. This building had the city hall and mayor's office on the ground level.
Not only was it used as a jail, but it was also used as the mayor's office and the police station.
The council chambers gave the appearance of a courtroom.
Inside the building was a stove, chairs, and a desk.
It's, again, about a half a block away. Yeah, you can barely see it right there, but this.
There were benches out front for the public to sit on. They could hold 6 to 10 men. There was a wooden rail out front for people to hitch their horses to, since they didn't have cars back then. Below in a sub-basement was the actual jail.
The entrance to the jail cell was an iron door that was outside, around the back of the building.
There were 3 iron jail cells in there. The cells were actually underground. This caused problems when it rained because the cells would flood.
No one really cared that they got wet because they were criminals.
The water level would reach their knees when standing, but the bunks would remain dry. This jail was only used until a bigger jail was built.
In 1896, a building was built on South Main Street beside the library.
This building also housed the city hall, the fire station, and the jail. The mayor's office was in the same place as the jail, and the council chambers were upstairs. The Jefferson Street jail was vacant for many years after the jail moved to Main Street. Weeds covered the property, and before long, it was overgrown.
And the building remained unused for years. The iron-barred windows were covered up with oak boards so nothing could get inside of the building.
Vines were growing on both sides of the building. For a short time, Burrell Webb owned this building and used it as a warehouse to store furniture in.
Later on, the jail cells were used to house stray dogs. In 1975, Claude Edwards purchased the jail, remodeled it, painted it green, and turned it into apartments for people to rent. But this only lasted for a few years.
In the last part of the 70s, Jerry Cook purchased the jail for the Bank of Montpelier. The bank bought the property and tore it down to turn it into a drive-through exit. By the late 1970s, the building was being torn down and there was only a single brick wall left standing.
One day, two teenage girls, known as the Pence sisters, decided to somehow get on the south wall. They climbed the skeleton of the Jefferson Street jail, and when they got up there, they straddled the wall and they got stuck. No one knows why they decided to climb the building while it was in the process of being demolished.
When they went to the top, they were too afraid to come down.
People noticed what happened and they called the firefighters. Finally, the firefighters came and got them unstuck.
They were removing history and it should never have been torn down. They probably wanted it gone because it was old and too small to be used as a jail. Today it could be used for a store or a shop, a church, a home for storage, or an office. It should have stayed here as a reminder of old buildings that used to be in Montpelier.
The Kmart Drive-In was a restaurant that people would go to for a snack like a hot dog and a root beer.
People would stop there during the day when they're riding around to get something to snack on.
The restaurant had a jukebox right inside the door, but the speakers were outside so that people could listen to music while they ate. There was a parking lot that was always filled with cars and people. People would meet there and talk and have a good time while they ate delicious food. Boys would go there to pick up pretty girls.
The owner's name was Marvin. He and his wife, Kate, moved to Montpelier from Ohio. Marvin was a thoughtful and hardworking man.
He was also thrifty, which means that he did not like to spend money. Marvin Gully previously worked at Fisher Body. His wife, Kate's parents were Ted and Stella Ball.
They moved to Montpelier from Ohio to help run the drive-in.
Marvin and Kate met at his dad's factory. His father's name was Frank.
Marvin drank Pepsi, but had a Coke machine outside, and nobody really knew why. Marvin Gully built and owned the Kmart Drive-In. The building was made out of concrete, wood, and asphalt shingles. It was a great place to go in the summer. The Kmart Drive-In only opened for 2 summers.
From 1967 to 1968.
It was located on the far east side of Montpelier where State Road 18 splits into High Street. The restaurant sat in the valley between those two roads. It was at the end of the cruise strip. Cruising was popular back then with teenagers. Today, kids play games, but back then they would go cruising.
Teenagers would cruise around to get something to eat.
Show off their cars and hang out with friends.
They would cruise from one end of town to the other to feel the fresh air and listen to good music.
People like to come to the Kmart to eat food. They love to cruise around the town, and when they would get hungry, they would stop at the Kmart to get something to eat. There was inside dining, but people did not really like to eat inside because they liked to sit in their cars and talk.
The parking lot was usually filled with people. It was similar to a root beer stand type of place and similar to Bummy's, Root Beer, and Bluffton.
The building was white with an orange trim around the windows. There was one window where you can order. There was a gravel parking lot that led to a cement sidewalk that circled the building.
There was a Pepsi menu sign hanging on the side of the building. There was also a Coke machine sitting outside where you could buy Coke in glass bottles. The Kmart was robbed shortly after opening, but no one was hurt. They sold ice cream, breaded tenderloins, hamburgers, and pizza. Marvin made the pizza sauce recipe by himself. They also had Pepsi and root beer at the restaurant. Customers liked to go to the Kmart because there was a jukebox that played music while they were eating. People could choose to eat inside or outside, but there were only a few seats inside, so most people had to eat outside. You could park right outside of the building, and a waitress took your order, and then you would wait to get your food, and you could eat your food while you were in your car.
It closed after Marvin and Kate got divorced and left the business.
Kate moved to Muncie and Marvin moved to Marion.
When Marvin died, the land that he owned was given back to the city, and the building was sealed up, left abandoned for many years, and never opened again. Eventually, it finally started to cave in.
It sat for 25 years and then got torn down in 2004.
Between 1895 and 1900, the Mayor Block was built. It was huge, with 2 stories, lots of windows, a flat roof, and an awning over every door. There were so many businesses in the Mayor Block. The Mayor Block was located on the corner of Huntington and Main Street. In 1900, the oil well supply company was in the Mayor Block. In 1910, there was a haberdashery, a grocery store delivery service, a saloon, a meat market, and a post office. There was then a cream station and a soft drink store as well. The Jarecki Manufacturing Company, which sold oil well supplies during the oil boom, was opened up on Main Street, but they moved into the Mayor Block on Huntington Street. They sold things like adjustable pipe tongs, shovels, valves, and oil rig lanterns. The Jarecki Manufacturing Company was formed in 1872 and came all the way from Pennsylvania to Montpelier. Montpelier benefited a lot from this, because long ago we found an oil lake under our town. People needed the tools to get the oil, so this store gave exactly that. People in Montpelier dug for oil for days with the tools from Jarecki Manufacturing. Jackson's Saloon was in the middle of the block, 2 businesses down from the Jarecki. When the oil boom struck, the city was overflowing with rowdy saloons.
100 years ago, we didn't have online delivery. Instead, businesses like Merchants Delivery had to use horse-drawn wagons. In 1910, Merchants Delivery moved into the Mayor Block for delivery purposes. Merchants Delivery was owned by G.W. Gilbert. He owned a fleet of 5 wagons, which all had Merchants Delivery painted on the sides. John Clark was one of the drivers at Merchants Delivery. If you lived in Montpelier, Merchants Delivery would bring your groceries to your home in coal horse-drawn wagons. The back of your wagon was cold and insulated to keep your food from spoiling. They also delivered supplies to 9 stores and meat to 3 meat markets in Montpelier. In 1920, Merchants Delivery was established as a grocery store. One of the earliest businesses in Montpelier was the Milliken Brothers clothing store, which was on the last storefront to the east. At the time, the post office was in the storefront beside it. The Milliken Brothers sold men's clothing, trunks, suitcases, and accessories. Long straw hats were sold at the store, and the windows were decorated with trees and straw. At this time, a men's clothing store was called a haberdashery. The Milliken Brothers had a tailor in the business that would measure your size and fit your clothes properly. When you bought hats, shoes, or any accessories that require repair, they would be able to fix it or upgrade it. Whenever someone would buy from Milliken's, they knew it was high quality.
Horton's newsstand was located on the east corner of the Mayor Block on West Huntington Street, where the Milliken brothers were. First, Horton's newsstand was in the Columbia Hotel, but then moved because he required more space. If you wanted the latest camera or just needed advice on photography, Mr. Horton could help. In the store, he had fine stationery, the latest books, and magazines. He owned a fine candy case and was known for his chocolate-coated caramels. He was also known for his hand-rolled cigars and overall friendliness. The only newspapers and magazines in Montpelier were sold at Horton's shop. Every morning at 5:30, Horton and his newspaper boys would deliver newspapers. All the newsboys all considered J.P. Horton to be a good boss and a very kind man. In 1946, George Courtney sold the Mayor Block to Max Myers.
The Point Restaurant was located in the storefront just west of Webb's. The owner was Minnie Cook, and her specialties were cottage cheese, pineapple, and lime jello. She had an amazing personality and told wonderful stories. Outside of the building, there was a large neon sign that lit up at night. Back then, they served low-priced food. It was tasty. Their prices were extremely low. It was amazing. T-bone steak was $1.35. Club steak was $1, and hamburgers were 89 cents. From 1940 to 1950, Floyd Haney and Frida Quillen were the managers of the restaurant.
Verl Webb was the owner and showman of Webb's Furniture, and also had a huge curling mustache. Verl Webb was not originally from Montpelier. He was from Marion. He was always helping people. Verl loved to sell. Before he started Webb's Furniture, he worked at the Farley Company and Kelly Furniture. so he had experience in the furniture selling business. After World War II, Verl Webb moved to Montpelier to start his own business. He and his family lived on 429 South Adams. Shaunti Webb was Verl's only child, and his wife's name was Evelyn. Verl owned racehorses and teamed up with Hal Kelly in the judges' stands for Indiana harness racing. Webb owned several racehorses to race at the track in town. He was very kind and accommodating to everyone, and whenever a girl graduated from high school, he would give them a miniature cedar chest. The Webb family thought of the store as part of the family.
There were 3 buildings that Webb's was in: the Palace Theater, then the Mill Block, and the last building it was in was the Columbia Hotel. In 1946, Webb's started in the Palace Theater building. They sold new furniture and refinished old furniture.
Webb's Furniture moved into the Mill Block on September 8, 1956, and moved all the furniture downstairs. Soon after that, Verl Webb bought the building from a man named Mac. There was a big main room that had tile flooring on the first floor. Mr. Webb had mostly living room furniture on the first floor in the main area, but off to the side he had furniture for other rooms. It was a family favorite store filled with furniture.
The merchandise included Frigidaire, Simon's bedding, Maytag washers, Zenith televisions, Lee carpeting, Armstrong floor covering, and Crowler living room and bedroom furniture. A lady from Frigidaire would occasionally come in to bake cookies on one of the stoves that Webb's Furniture was selling to demonstrate that the appliances worked and to try and convince customers to buy.
The second floor of the building was divided into several apartments, and they were occupied by Verl, his wife, and daughter, Dr. Fraser, and other young people. To lower the monthly rent fee, they would work for Mr. Webb by painting or doing regular work around the showrooms. Over time, all of the other businesses in the building left, and Mr. Webb took most of it over to show off all of his furniture.
From Thanksgiving to Christmas, all the businesses in Montpelier would stay open from 8 in the morning until 9 at night so people could get their Christmas shopping done without having to go somewhere else or wait. During this time of year, Mr. Webb had a corner of the store on the west side of the building that was dedicated to selling toys for kids as Christmas presents. Mrs. Webb managed the toy store. During the late 70s, the Montpelier Chamber of Commerce established a Christmas tree decorating contest. The tree decorating contest was for all the business in Montpelier to show off their tree decorating skills. The Webb family liked dogs so much that they had dogs that went to work at the store every day with Mr. Webb. There were 3 dogs in the store. Their names were Sweetheart, Paige, and Buster. They also had 1 cat and a litter of kittens.
On August 21st, 1976, the apartments above Webb's Furniture broke out in a fire, and the Mare Block burnt down. Jim Carfield received a call that said the store was in flames. It caught fire early in the morning before the workday started, and whatever caught fire turned into a raging inferno. Mr. Webb was the first person at the fire, and he made sure that all the people were out of the burning building. After the people were out, Mr. Webb went in to save all the pets. Thankfully, no one was in the building when it burned down. The apartments on top caught on fire. Soon after the first level caught fire, the fire broke through the roof The fire was so hard to put out that they had to get the Marion Fire Department to help along with Montpelier's fire department.
They fought for 3 hours to control the fire. The fire was that big. During the fire, the citizens entered the showroom to carry out the furniture and appliances. The people offered their garages and empty buildings to store the furniture and appliances. The people of Montpelier repaid Von Webb for his good deeds. Most of the merchandise was saved. Webb's inventory list showed that all but one table was returned. After the fire, from the outside, you cannot tell what damages are done, but windows are broken with ashes above them, and the roof is gone. The burnt wood and smoke off the fire could be smelled when the fire was spreading, and then even 3 weeks later after it was finally put out. This was a loss for everyone. Webb's furniture moved into the Columbia Hotel because the mail block was beyond repair.
All of the showrooms had carpeted floors. In 1954, Jim McPherson's parents lived on the 3rd floor of the Mayer block. Jim McPherson's grandparents were the managers of the Columbia Hotel. They would work there till 1976 when the Webb's furniture in the Mayer block burnt down just next door and had to move to the Columbia Hotel building where the Dollar General is now.
There was a showroom for flowers from the poser room and some pottery from the village pottery. Every room was decorated with merchandise, like a room in a home. Every winter there had a man that would clear off the snow on the roof because it was in bad shape and it might fall through. In 1982, Webb sold the building because he was ready to retire.
We should try to save history and its memories from disappearing from time. History has its stories and tales that we were able to learn from, or just for sheer amusement, and we should keep them from evaporating into dust.
Van Cook's car clinic was located at 118 West High Street for many years. In May of 1895, there was a small wood frame building in this lot. This was a woman's hat store, but sadly it was torn down. Then a new building was built. This white brick building was built by Thomas Shaw later in 1895. The structure included limestone window sills, cone-shaped finials, and a pressed metal cornice.
By October of 1900, it was the Herald newspaper office. The Herald had moved several times before and several times after it was in this building. The newspaper was so important to the people of Montpelier because it was their own news and they needed to know the events going on within the town. Without TVs, newspapers like the Herald told everyone the news. The Herald print shop was at the edge of an alley and was owned by L.G. Knight. H.L. Trotman was the boss of several employees and editor of the newspaper.
In May of 1910, there was a barber shop in one section of the building and a shoe repair store in the east part of the building.
Van Cook was born on February 16, 1910 in Montpelier, Indiana. Van's father, W.D.D. Cook, worked on oil wells in the oil field while Van was growing up.
And in 1897, his father opened Cook's Ice and Coal Shop. Van Cook grew up at 321 South Jefferson Street, which is still owned by the Cook family today. He married Garnett Jackson on April 4, 1936.
She was a secretary at RCA and she was an amazing cook. She was kind to all of the people she met. During World War II, Van served our country in the 8th AAF Air Force as an aircraft engine mechanic.
Cook served for 4 years, giving him plenty of experience.
In World War II, he learned skills for repairing engines and he used those skills back home for his own vehicle repair shop called Cook's Car Clinic.
Van Cook owned the building, which was an auto shop located at 118 West High Street. They had a big door to bring cars into the building so they could repair them.
Van was an auto mechanic who worked on anything that had a motor. He worked on vehicles like cars, trucks, boat motors, and other things. The owners of the vehicles were always satisfied because he did the best job they had ever seen. He could fix almost anything. Gilbert Sills said, "My father took a boat motor to Van and he overhauled it. I still have the motor and it still runs to this day." The motors ran forever after he worked on them. Van did the best work.
Van Cook had two main hobbies. First, he loved to fish and was very passionate about it. He had his own fishing boat called the Tomcat that he worked on year-round so it would be ready for fishing. He also loved to race his hot rod. Van Cook used to always get first place with his hot rod motor stock car racer. That was always his pride and joy.
He loved races, so he started helping other people win by making their engines better and making sure they were up and running.
It was nice because people didn't have to leave the vicinity of Montpelier just to have their cars fixed. He had a 50-gallon tank filled with water that he would strap boat motors to test if the boat motors worked. Van Cook, who was a perfectionist, specialized in car motors and boat motors and tested them to make sure they worked before giving them back to the customer.
There was a big black dog that was always chained up inside the building. The fearsome beast's name was Tex. Every time someone would walk down High Street past the Van Cook Car Clinic, Tex would bark at them. Many people said that the fearsome beast was possessed. He would walk on the other side of the street, hoping to avoid the animal's wrath. You couldn't help but feel uncomfortable as the dog stared at you, practically daring you to walk across the street near its window. Van's brother Bob Cook was a very important man and a great chef. He cooked on the east and west coast of the United States, prepared a meal for President Eisenhower and President Truman. He cooked for the movie stars from I Love Lucy, including Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball. Bob Cook also was a chef during World War II. He served in Africa, England, and the United States. He was aboard the first ship that refueled at sea. Bob bought the brick house right across the alley from Van Cook's car clinic and turned it into a restaurant called the Old Brick House. The choice of doing this caused many verbal fights between him and his brother, especially when Van's mean bulldog would tinkle in Bob's bushes. One day, Bob bought a BB gun, and when Van was walking his dog, Bob shot the dog in the rear. Bob and his brother Van did not always get along with each other. Both of them had very bad tempers that made them argue all the time.
Bob Cook was a really good chef, and people said that the Old Brick House was the best restaurant around. Before the Cook brothers owned the two buildings, it was the Scholl brothers, Thomas and Calvin, who were the ones who built both of the buildings, the Old Brick House and Van Cook's car clinic. Inside one of the windows was a small wooden model of an oil well that Van created himself. People who walked past the shop were fascinated by the oil well model. One day it wasn't there and nobody could find it. When you walked into the building, there were old creaky floors overlaid with wood. There were wonderful smells of gas and oil everywhere. There were stairs leading down to the basement and very steep stairs that led to the second floor where Mr. and Mrs. Cook lived in an apartment above. The proprietors, Van and Garnett, loved to eat out at restaurants, refusing to eat at home. They both especially liked to eat at the Hoosier House restaurant in Montpelier. They had a kitchen table that they never used, so they sold it to their friend Carol Chandler. Garnett said, "Carol, we've never eaten off of it." On December 1st, 1991, Van Cook sadly passed away in Ball Memorial Hospital in Muncie, Indiana. His death was mournful and many people were devastated. He was 81 when he died, and he will be remembered.
Later on, the building became old, rusty, and run down. The roof leaked and the basement flooded.
Soon the businesses left and this building was torn down due to the lack of management.
On the afternoon of Tuesday, August 13th, 2019, the Van Cook building was torn down. This used to be a beautiful place, but now there is only rubble left. I wish we could still see it today and learn more about it. In the early 1900s, there was a marble shop where the Palace Theater would eventually be. By April 1910, the marble shop was replaced by a restaurant. These earlier buildings were constructed out of wood. Gradually, over time, the wood broke down, so a new building was built out of bricks. This new building had very ornate brickwork, with fine detail at the top. By May of 1920, there was one building split into 3 sections. The storefront at the north end of the building was a theater, in the middle was a candy store, and the third was the post office, which was on the south end of the building.
On November 23rd, 1921, a robbery occurred at the post office. 2 bandits proceeded to steal from the U.S. Post Office during a cold, dark night. They blew open the safe in the building. A Montpelier night officer named William Jerry Engel was warming himself up in the interurban station just south of the post office when he heard the explosion. Engel was startled and stepped out of the station in time to see the 2 robbers dashing away from the post office and running north on the sidewalk. Jerry called out to them to halt, but one man went and hid behind the wall of the building. Jerry approached the other man. He put his gun behind his back and ordered the bandit to put his hands up. The thief put his left hand up, but his right hand went for the gun and shot Jerry in the stomach. The police officer then opened fire on the robber and used every round in his weapon.
Steve Garrison, the janitor at the Farmers Deposit Bank at the time, saw the whole thing happen and proceeded to assist Jerry to the bank building. Immediately after, the ambulance was called. Jerry was later escorted to the hospital in Bluffton, where he had surgery and was in critical condition for several days. Thanks to Steve, he did survive, yet never fully recovered. The body of the robber that Jerry shot was found in the post office and was taken to the Walker Funeral Home. The body stayed there for many days, and even though 8,000 people viewed it, no one ever claimed to know his identity. Eventually, the body was sent to a medical college for examination. Later on, they identified the body as George Bolton, the man who disappeared at the scene of the crime, fled to Ohio, where he was arrested as well.
The Davis, New York store, owned by M.G. Davis, was established in Montpelier as early as 1906. The store sold a multitude of items for the whole family. The Davis, New York store was your ordinary store. It was a dry goods store, which sold items that didn't require special equipment and temperatures to keep it fresh. They sold other items such as fabric, thread, clothing, rugs, and other dry goods. You can buy nearly anything you could think of. How would you like if you did not have to go to Muncie or Harvard City? A variety of women's apparel was stocked, such as hats, skirts, jackets, and cloaks. Montpelier was well renowned for their local shoe stores, but Davis, New York store was the best. All sizes of shoes were sold in women's, men's, and children's styles. Always in stock were shoes from brands such as W.L. Douglas, Royal Blue, and John Strutman. Compared to modern prices, everything in stock was inexpensive. Men could get a pair of socks for 4 cents. Wool blankets were $4.95, and soap was 25 cents. Groceries were even sold here. The Davis store had very low prices for food at that time.
On March 21st, 1916, there was a severe windstorm in Montpelier that wrecked the front of the post office. Bricks were thrown through the front of the Davis, New York store as well.
In the 1920s, the Davis, New York store left the building, and the Palace Theater was established to replace it. This theater was originally operated by Frank Walters. In that era, this theater seemed massive, but compared to the theaters of today, it was rather small. Theaters today hold up to 300 people, while the Palace could hold an audience of 100 people. It was advertised as being cool, comfortable, and inviting. The theater posted information in the windows informing you of the new movies. The people of Montpelier would have been ecstatic to see these new productions coming to town. On the front of the theater, there was a large marquee jutting out over the sidewalk. There was also a multitude of posters advertising movies that were coming soon. The mantra for the Palace Theater was, "Wherefore Montpelier?" The owners thought that Montpelier was a wholesome city and tried to entertain the people.
As you entered the theater, there was a ticket booth, and ticket prices were as low as 20 cents. I wish prices were like that today. Now it's like $100 to go to the movies. For many years, Lovely Reinhardt sold tickets and concessions at the theater. Further into the lobby, there was a concession stand, a glass case filled with various sweets and popcorn. You only had to pay 5 cents to obtain a bag of mouth-watering popcorn. On either side of the concession stand, there was an entrance to the theater. As you entered the theater, you'd see rows of wooden fold-down chairs lined up neatly facing the screen. The theater was very dark, only lit by projection light. When the Palace Theater was opened, silent movies were still being released. During the many silent movies, there was a pianist who played background music to accompany the production. The last pianist to play at the Palace Theater was Geraldine Heiser Walker. The most difficult part of this job was that no one had specified a score for her to play during the movies, so she had to make it up on her own. Eventually, technology came around, and it was possible to show movies with sound. A variety of shows were shown on the big screen. However, the westerns were most popular. This was the first place in Montpelier where this new technology was introduced. On Thursday nights, you only had to pay 10 cents to get admission into the theater. The movies that played on these nights usually consisted of westerns, starring famous cowboys of the time.
In April of 1929, Frank Walters sold the building to J.L. Geedy of Indianapolis. Mr. Walters, after selling the palace, started several theaters in Hartford City. The palace reopened around the time of the Great Depression, and because of the recent stock market crash, the theater would give people free passes or discounts. The post office remained in this location until the 1930s, when it was transferred to West Huntington Street, in what is now the Neff Realty Building. Sometimes the school children would eagerly walk down to the theater for special shows.
On July 22, 1938, the Palace Theater was robbed again. Two boys from Montpelier stole $145 from the Palace Theater. The robbers were William Garrison and Claude Spaulding. William was 17 years old and Claude was 16 years old. This was a tragedy to hurt their own community. They broke in by climbing through a coal chute. They were probably covered in black filth when they got out. William and Claude hid the money box in Claude's shed, and then the boys went on a spending spree at the Muncie Fair. They bought toys, ice cream, food, and played games. Then one person was suspicious about the kids having so much money. They alerted the police and got caught. Carrying around that kind of money would be like a kid walking around with $1,000 today. The police found more evidence when they found the cash box in the shed, and William and Claude both pleaded guilty.
The theater went through multiple owners. For a brief amount of time, George Dallas owned the theater. In the 1940s, the Stuckey family owned and operated the palace. The Stuckey family resided in a big, white house on Huntington Street, across from where the Pizza King is today. J.E. Stuckey and his son, Claire, owned multiple theaters in the Midwest. One was the Rex Theater in Montezuma, Indiana. The tickets to get into the theater were 25 cents. Upon purchasing the theater, the Stuckey family remodeled the palace because it was not up to date. Mr. Stuckey helped fund this establishment and was even known to slumber behind the big screen. The theater was a safe and secure place where the children could go so that their parents could have some quiet time. The kids especially liked the cartoons shown before the movie. Each time someone turned 12 years old, they would celebrate at the theater by getting to watch a free movie. After this, kids would have to pay full price for a ticket. If you tried to deceive them about your age, it never worked because the owners knew every customer and their age.
Another change was that in 1927, Robert Callahan was hired for the palace.
Robert Callahan was hired for the theater as a projectionist and mechanic. A projectionist would cast movies onto the big screen.
He was born in 1926 and lived on 217 East Vine Street in Montpelier. Robert served in the Army in World War II, and during the Army's occupation of Japan, he served as a projectionist in the Special Services. During this time, he booked shows in the largest theater in Tokyo. When he returned from the war, he was sent to Montpelier to be projectionist for the Palace Theater for 1 month.
However, he ended up staying in Montpelier for 35 years. He was also first class mechanic. If a beat, the doors, screen, speakers, lights, or the film needed to be fixed, Robert would fix it. Robert passed away on Friday, June 11, 1983, and was buried in Brookside Cemetery in Montpelier.
In September of 1945, Stuckey gave up ownership of the theater and sold it to George and Violet Setos. Eventually, the Lowe Theater Group took over ownership. The Palace Theater was closed for almost a year as it was remodeled and rebuilt. When the movie house reopened, it had a new marquee, ticket office, brand new seats, and a new screen. It seemed to have improved from its old state. Lowe's had some good policies, but also some bad policies. Unfortunately, in the 1940s, the Lowe's Theater Group put an anti-black policy that forbade them from patronizing the theater. Black people were restricted from entering. There was only one black family in town named the Robinsons. A policy was resented by most, especially since it was against the Robinson family. Emery Klein, the manager, had to deliver the message to them. Emery Klein, whose dad was O.R. Klein, a principal of the grade school in Montpelier, was one of the many who wouldn't accept this rule. He loathed this rule so much, he quit. Others who couldn't quit petitioned against this rule. Then the whole town boycotted the theater. Montpelier resident Paul Pugh stated that the town went into an uproar and passed petitions around to make the owners let blacks into the theater. The town boycotted the theater because of this, and then it finally allowed the Robinsons to enter.
After World War II, when traveling became easier, small movie houses had a hard time competing with big city theaters. As drive-in theaters started being established, the small-town theaters started losing business. The introduction of television also hurt business, and eventually most of the small town shows how to close their doors. This is what happened to the Palace Theater in Montpelier. In the 1950s, the building began to gradually fall into disrepair and was slowly rotting away. And in the 50s, the roof collapsed.
Montpelier doesn't have that much to do nowadays, still the children back then were lucky to have the Palace Theater. The kids could walk uptown to see the matinees, which was a movie during the day. National Kids Day was observed in Montpelier on Saturday, September 15th, 1954. This event was sponsored by the Kiwanis Club. The Palace Theater made the day free for kids. They got a free sack of popcorn and an orange soft drink. This was a great event for Montpelier because it was good for business and made people want to go there more. Sadly, the Palace Theater closed in 1957 and stayed closed for many years to make sure people and animals wouldn't get into the building. The doors and windows were all boarded up. This was a huge loss for the city of Montpelier. So many people were able to enjoy local entertainment at this location. This was very devastating for Montpelier.
This pharmacy suffered immensely due to loss of business since the theater was one of the main hotspots to attract business in Montpelier. Prior to the start times of certain movies, people would visit the pharmacy across the street to enjoy a delectable ice cream or soda. With the closing of the Palace Theater, the ice cream counter wasn't as busy, so the pharmacist, Braunschweiger, took it and most of the booths out.
To make room for the new apartment complex called Thunderbird Arms, Mayor Kenneth Neff decided to demolish the building in 1968.
People would have an apartment now, but the city lost entertainment.
Ollie Straub was born on July 22, 1874, to a 50-year-old Daniel Straub and a 42-year-old Rebecca Billman in Pennsylvania. He had a brother and sister. In 1880, at 6, he would lose his mother. His father was a shoemaker. At 17, Ollie's job was to work at the Decatur limestone quarry. One day, when he was there, his middle and ring finger got smashed by a rock. However, it would not cause lasting problems. The man who would become Hamburger Ollie started serving food at the Montpelier races. He was a popcorn vendor there. He would keep selling food, but got a horse-drawn wagon to sell it from. He would still sell at the races, but was getting bigger. He would get a new spot to sell from soon, and this would be the restaurant he got his reputation from.
He got married in 1886 to Lillian Ellen Merkel. He was 22 and she was 20. Lillian had already been married to Mr. Spaulding and had already had a child named Dustin. On February 18, 1897, they had their own child, a girl. Her name was Veda. Ollie was the head of the household in 1900, even though his father lived with him. He lived with his father, wife, 7-year-old stepson, and 3-year-old daughter. Veda would die in 1900, and Dustin would move out after 1910. In 1911, he would have an ice cream social in his house, big enough to get the plan mentioned in the newspaper, but he wasn't really the host. The ladies of the Montpelier Church of Christ, where he was a member, were in charge of it.
He would get his own restaurant at 120 West Huntington Street in 1900. It was a temporary building. It was out of place, surrounded by permanent 2-story brick buildings. The empty plot is now between the Hoosier House and the Melody Bar. His menu was just soup, sandwiches, and desserts, but it was enough for him to earn his nickname of Hamburger Ollie. He specialized in 5 burgers for only 25 cents, around $5 now. On Tuesdays, he served brain sandwiches. Brain sandwiches were invented in the Midwest states of Indiana, Illinois, or Missouri. They were made from, as it sounds, brains, mostly cows. During the Great Depression, everything was used.
It is not truly known what the inside looks like, but likely there was seating on one side and a bar on the other side. Sitting on either side, you can get more than just food. Company aplenty would be there, with horseshoe pits out back. With the horseshoe craze of that era, it was the perfect time for a skilled boy to make a name in the sport. A local legend called Jimmy Risk would start learning how to play with older players. He would go on to be one of the best players in the nation, but would come back to play behind Straub's restaurant.
For the next 35 years, he would have almost the same life. However, he would lose family. In 1921, after being a restaurant owner for 2 decades, Ollie's father, Daniel, passed away on October 13th. Ollie would lose his brother, Charles, next. On February 19, 1937, the last direct family he would lose was his sister, Anna Jane, who would pass away in 1944 at 70. Ollie was still a member of the Church of Christ in 1946 and would have a photo taken of him on the steps during a visit. He would retire in 1948. Ollie Straub died on November 22, 1953, at the age of 79.
In 1887, oil was found under Blackford County. Because of this, new factories were built here. Montpelier offered companies incentives such as free land and free gas to get new businesses in order to fortify the economy. Everybody flooded to Montpelier to make money because there were so many new jobs here. In 1895, on the south edge of the city, was the Chicago Truck and Steel Casting Company. There were wide open fields surrounding the facility. It was later called Semi-Steel Casting Company. In 1897, it moved to Montpelier from Newcastle, Pennsylvania. At that time, it only had 75 employees. 3 years later, it changed its name to National Steel Casting Company. The factory had shifts that worked day and night so that they could get the most out of their workers. The factory had a brick wall surrounding it with trees along the edge. There were a lot of different sections in the area. There were long brick buildings with smokestacks and chimneys. The floors were dirt floors that had been packed down. There was an oil well at the front of the factory. The steel casting company office building was made of concrete. The manager worked at the office to do filing for all the orders of the factory. Inside the office building there was a safe, stove, and wooden floors. National Steel had a short track railroad that went to the building so they could ship goods in and out of Montpelier more efficiently. A short track connects shipping places with the main track of the railroad. Next to the road today, covered in dirt, you can still see the track going towards where the main track used to be located. Some say on the northwest corner of the property was a saloon where the workers might have stopped for a drink. There was at least 4 storage tanks by the woods that they used to store natural gas in. North of the factory, there were houses for the workers, and as a bonus, the workers were allowed to have free gas for their homes. The factory had their own gas wells that pumped gas from the ground and put gas through the pipes and into their houses. The gas was used for heating their homes, gas lamps, and their cooking stoves. Because they worked so hard and did a good job, the factory helped them have a better life. The company built houses near the factory so the employees could live there and also go to work.
There were 10 buildings that made up the National Steel Casting Company. The buildings were made of bricks and had iron roofs. There was an auto shop, grinding and mixing buildings, a foundry, and blasting and mixing rooms. A steel casting is formed by pouring molten steel into a mold. They made steel castings by melting them into a liquid, pouring the metal into a mold, and removing the steel casting. Steel casting was used in railroads, construction, drilling, transportation, and mining industries. Some examples of items that are made this way are gears, valves, car parts, tools, and railroad tracks. On the map, there are 2 storerooms and 2 pattern warehouses. Maybe this was where they used to store steel, metal, or copper material. The machine shop was useful to keep production going by having speedy repairs of the machines. They made high and low carbon wire, spring wire, welding wire, bolts, nails, and other steel products. They would then ship it out and sell their supplies to farmers and other people.
T.C. Neal was the manager of the National Steel Casting Company. He was born on February 12, 1852 in Marion, Indiana. He was only 19 years old when he started to work. T.C. Neal arrived at Montpelier in 1871 as a grain dealer. A grain dealer is a person who buys grain and sells it to other people. His partner was John D. Marshall, and their partnership lasted until 1875. He owned a farm 1 mile west of Montpelier's downtown called the Oakland Stock Farm, which was located right on the other side of the road where the dog food factory is today. He had his own pond there for fishing and relaxing. It had a first-class racetrack for horses. Races were held for trotting horses, pacer horses, and even foot races. T.C. Neal had the best of the horses in town and was even a breeder of thoroughbred horses and Jersey cattle. T.C. drilled for oil on his property. He was elected as county commissioner in 1882 and served as Montpelier's mayor from 1914 to 1918.
On Tuesday, December 28, 1905, the largest casting ever made in Indiana was forged at the National Steel Casting Company in Montpelier, Indiana. The glass flattener weighed 40,000 pounds. It was huge. Shipping it was one thing. Shipping it without breaking it was another. The risk of it breaking would be catastrophic. After that, a new building was built. A 150 horsepower boiler was made. Steam heat was installed to heat the entire plant, and there was 125 men on the payroll. At the time, Montpelier had the best mill. National Steel Casting had a busy time getting all the orders done day and night. In February of 1906, they had to hire new workers to fill all the jobs they needed done. The company needed to find people to work more shifts so the orders wouldn't get canceled. They had 125 men working at the time. Business was booming.
In 1910, the steel casting company was doing well. They were a big hit because they had more workers. With all the workers, they made more products and caused the company to be more successful. During this period, the workers' payroll was so much bigger. They wanted to build, but they couldn't because there was not enough room and too many people were coming in with orders. In July, Montpelier's flourishing with oil, and the company was talking about how there would be more gas wells drilled in hopes of supplying fuel to run the furnaces at the mill. National Steel Casting had 160 men employed, and the mill worked day and night non-stop. There had never been a time that this company is so plentiful.
On March 21st, 1916, a tornado hit Montpelier, Indiana. It was a frightening day. Massive damage was caused to homes and buildings all over town. The tornado's path was 5 miles wide, and it hit many businesses, including the Montpelier Manufacturing Company, Jackson Shovel Works, Standard Oil Company, Cup and Metal Works, and the National Steel Casting Company. Many places were so badly torn up that they couldn't open back up until they fixed it. The cost to rebuild just the National Steel Casting was $40,000. Most of the factory was pulverized. The bricks were scattered and the steel frames of the building were destroyed. People couldn't return to work until their workplace was repaired. The National Steel Cast Company have been involved in a strike since November 26, 1923, and the factory workers were angry because they needed more pay. So they left. When they left, the steel casting company just got new workers called scabs or strike breakers. After the company moved to piecework instead of annual pay, the workers went on strike. Soon every worker was fired on the spot and replaced by strike breakers. The people of Montpelier were on the workers' side until the workers, or so the people thought, planted the bomb.
The hotel was picketed by strikers, and they harassed the citizens and strikebreakers to the point that they were afraid to go to the Uptown District at these times. They were really terrorizing the people that came in. The police had to paint lines on the sides of the sidewalks. If the strikers crossed the lines, they could be arrested or get shot for picking on the scabs. When they got new workers, the other workers got mad, so they put a bomb in plain view right in front of the building where the new workers lived, and the bomb exploded in front of the Columbia Hotel. This event happened on January 9, 1924, shortly after midnight. The bomb did terrible damage to the hotel. It wrecked the lower floor and broke glass windows. Many people were saved by a big safe in front of the wall, and when the bomb went off, the blast ricocheted off the safe, damaged the front of the hotel and the buildings on the opposite side of the street. No one was killed during the blast, but one was injured, a deputy sheriff named Homer Elliott. It would have done a lot more damage if there wasn't a safe right in front of the bomb. The citizens were shocked at the horrific events happening. The bombing had an effect on the community, and the steel factory was closed down. The trial lasted for 16 days, the longest held in Blackford Court.
Many people believed nowadays that the company placed the bomb to punish the workers. All of the strikers were arrested and charged with conspiracy. William J. Davis was put on trial for all the workers. T.C. Neal started the Neal Theater so that he could make some extra money and give back to Montpelier. Shortly before the 1920s, the Neal Theater was built on the southeast corner of Jefferson and High Street. T.C. Neal made sure that the theater was welcoming with nice, comfortable furniture and a balcony. Dressing rooms were located under the stage, and the theater even had an orchestra pit where bands would perform. The theater was entertainment for the people of Montpelier. Road shows came to the Neal Theater. They traveled all around the area putting on plays. He had to close down the theater because of the Great Depression.
Montpelier had a Great Depression that hit before it hit the rest of the country. No one had money. No one had jobs. People didn't have much food. After the strike, National Steel Casting Company was still open and in operation, but things were starting to go downhill for the company. They didn't have enough money to keep on working and could not pay their workers. It got to where they were in debt and could either file for bankruptcy or have the court give them a receiver, and they chose to be operated by a receiver. In May of 1928, they were repairing the railroad on the property by fixing the rails and ties. They had plenty of work, but not enough money. A month later, sadly, the factory shut down and they decided to sell it. National Steel Casting Company, the land, machinery, and all of the buildings were put to auction on Wednesday, June 27, 1928. The minimum bid was set at $60,000, but no one bid for it. Plus, no one had the money to. A year later, a Muncie junk dealer bought it for $15,000, and the National Steel Casting Company was closed forever. The factory couldn't afford much, but had big plans only if they had the money. The National Steel Casting Company could have survived longer, or even until today. Signs of a gigantic depression were coming soon. Factories were closing all over the country.
On April 28, 1928, T.C. Neal passed away. His funeral was held on a Monday, and he was buried in Odd Fellows Cemetery. T.C. was a good man, and he was 76 when he died. This was a big loss because he helped our city. The citizens, his family and friends, felt really sad because he was a great man. In the 1970s, the owner of the land was Arlen Mann. What did he do with the land? Well, he loved horses, so a horse barn was built to take care of the horses. He also put up fences.
This was a hangout area for teenagers to go and do bad things. There was possibly a cave with tunnels underneath the buildings. Kids would go into the cave to drink and smoke. We could not find it, but we did find a small hole with beer bottles on the sides. After 1976, a bag of marijuana was found on that property. The police burnt the marijuana at the stone quarry to get rid of it. After a couple of years, the office building was used to store hay for the horses, and one day, during a storm, a bolt of lightning hit a tree and it fell over and destroyed the building. All that was left were pieces of concrete and a small wall. Arlen Mann didn't want the land anymore, so he sold it to the Phillips family.
By the 1980s, Norma Smith purchased the horse barn and sold it to her son, Jody Smith, in the year 2000.
National Steel Casting Company would have been dominant coming into town. Many people relied on it, but now it's in the woods, smothered in blankets of trees and covered in leaves. There are ruined walls, crumbling concrete, furnaces that have been left in shambles, and an oil pit hiding from time. Fallen bricks show that it fell to history. It was important to Montpelier, and now it's gone. It was a big place, but now it's been reduced to rubble. Every day it is crumbling, and soon there will be nothing left but dust.
Ghost buildings is like, we can't save the buildings anymore, but we're saving the memories of them.
But I'm not sure what to do next. We're gonna be all over online. We had them written down on one of these pages, but we have a lot of stuff written down on one. Yes.
So we do it so we can share the history with other people so the buildings don't get forgotten.
Like doing the research was pretty cool. All the weeks and minutes we put together working on it.
There could just be a building that used to be there right where you're standing. Like, you never know, but if you come here to Montpelier History Club, you'd know.
Little bits of information from all these different places, how I got all of them and then put them together and then made it one story out of what wasn't really a story before.
So I'll probably get kind of emotional, and I'll feel proud but emotional a lot.
Why is that?
Because, I've worked on this for so long. It is kind of cozy.
So you broke my number one rule and you got hurt.
Yeah, we have to go take them. Wait, open that.
I'm going to feel proud and excited.
It makes me feel happy and excited because of all the work we've put into this.
Well, it makes me feel happy for all of us because we all work together as a team to save history.
I started when I was 2 or 4 or so, and now I'm about 8. I've met a lot of new friends. It's just so fun to work with other people. We can get more bonds with each other. Working together, getting to know new people. I barely even knew my ABCs when I started. I didn't know that was there. I didn't know this was there. I didn't know there was a movie theater. I had no clue. I just think it would be a better place if it was still like it was. I'm just glad that I know this now so I can share it on to other family members. And maybe when I have kids, I can tell them all that I learned and all about this club.
I get to show it to my family and friends and my future kids.
I messed up on everything.
Indiana Landmarks, they knew that when they saw us saving history, they knew saying, hey, we should give the trophy to the Montpelier History Club because they saved a lot of buildings.
Well, I was really excited. We finally got what we were waiting for, just people to know what we've been doing and people that have done things just like us. And it was crazy, but we were the only kids there.
We are getting recognized for all this hard work that we've been doing, saving history of this place that we live in.
Come on, Ryan.
I'm going to feel very excited because we've worked 2.5 years on it and it took a long time. If it's only one person, you don't know what to do, but what if you had more people?
Well, we spent so much time on it because we were trying to help people learn about these buildings that have been either destroyed or eroded over time.
To make them basically feel like they've came back to life.
Which sold items that didn't require...
Yes, Ryan? And now we bought a building, which we call it our building because it's not just one person's building. Thankful for Ryan for buying it for us to rebuild because they said that if we didn't save that building, they would have torn it down.
I think it's important because it's one of the buildings that have been here for a while. Hasn't completely been taken down, but we need to replace some of it so it can continue to be standing, left standing.
You're dragging it across the ground.
You gotta use teamwork and you gotta work together to make sure that they just don't get bulldozed at all.
Because I feel like it's really important to save the past. Also, another thing that I like about working on this building is that I have something to do after school. I have something to do on the weekends. It gets me away from electronics.
By preserving anything, and especially buildings, you preserve all of the memories and events that have happened there.
So the main thing is the people that were there. They have their own stories too.
I think these people would be very pleased if they knew that we were telling the stories of their establishments.
They would feel very happy, I think. They would feel so astonished that we're doing this.
Make them feel like that their building was important.
Basically, taking all of the history that they had in that building, and we are trying to save it.
I think they'd be impressed and proud, and they'd be like, wow, they've worked a lot on this. It's insane because I actually had a building of my own, and now they're saving it.
It's really important to keep it standing because it's part of our town's history. There's so much that needs to be done, and we're going to do all of it, and we're not going to let it be a ghost building.
Now it's our time to save history. Them stories will be with us forever.
See these buildings that nobody else would have cared about to save the memory of them. I got into history because older people brought me into it, and now I love it. It's important to me. I'm going to try to make it my job. I've been in this club for a long time.
I can't think of his name.
Jimmy Russ?
Yeah, Jimmy Russ. Jimmy Russ.
It's big. I think it's going to be amazing. I've done other documentaries and these projects before, and it's always just big. It's emotional, especially when I can hold it in my hands. When you're younger, you don't really think that it's that important. Sometimes you're just doing whatever you're doing. But then when you're older, being involved with younger people, it's meaningful. It's probably going to be important to them, even if they don't realize it now.
What I hope people get from this documentary is that there are people out there trying to save this kind of stuff. And hopefully it will encourage other people to do stuff like it too.
These buildings are gone, but we are the ones that are bringing them back to life.
What is that? I had some chicken nuggets. Oh.
I'm so hard. I was stealing shield. Not so much. Go ahead, take it.
No, get your arm. Hey, Grace.
My little pup. My little pup. My little bear. My little pup.
His office, before he was closed, we left the movie right open our ears pierced. We came back and watched the rest of the movie.
Hey everyone, my name is Noah and I'm part of that original Ghost Buildings team that made the first video.
When I was part of the team, I did the interurban station for Montpelier, and I thought that was so interesting. I saved that part of history on my own, which is something that was really special to me. And now you guys are in that same set of shoes I was in. You're each saving buildings, you're saving their history and preserving that for future generations to see. And that's something you should really be proud of.
Hello everybody, my name is Trayvon Stewart. I worked on the Ghost Buildings project in the 4th grade with Mr. Ingram. Very amazing project, by the way. We got to see some old buildings. I wanted to give my full support to all of the beautiful people in the History Club currently working on this project. I'm stuttering.
I know Ryan loves you guys coming down every week for History Club every Wednesday. We love seeing you guys. And hopefully, part 3, maybe,